because they're streaming from the same Hello and welcome to the Eä Tolkien Society. I'm Hawk Robinson, president and founder. This is our monthly Smial Eä Tolkien Society meeting. We are an official Smile of the UK Tolkien Society. Today is January 16th, 2021. We, at least those of us here, survived the year of the confirmed crit, 2020. Unless any of us are ring wraiths or something and you haven't informed us. And sorry for a little bit late start. We've got a brand new broadcast box in here. We use RPG Research's resources, and they got a brand new box, and we're still setting it up, and it was given a little bit of grief, but we're up and running. And as is often happens after the November, December holidays, January attendance is a little light. People have kind of fallen out of their routine, and it takes sometimes a month or three for people to get back into the groove. We really miss the folks who aren't here from the UK and Italy and elsewhere. We really love it when they join the conversation. And so we wish you all the best wherever it may be and hope that we'll see you again at our next meeting. We meet on the third Saturday of each month from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. You can learn more about our organization at tolkienscholars.org. Been doing these meetings since about 2005. We also run the annual Tolkien Moot, annual gaming and literary convention, generally the third Saturday of each July, although sometimes we've had to shift that from time to time. You learn more about the moots, and eventually we'll have signups working for 2021 at tolkienmoot.org. Also, if you'd like to check out our magazine, Other Minds Magazine, you can go to, is it other, I keep forgetting which. I've got a lot of different URLs for it, and I forget which one is the active one. I think otherminds.net is the best one now. Yeah, otherminds.net. You can get the latest edition. I think we're up there in the 20s now. It's a combination of literary discussion and gaming information for people who like to do role-playing gaming in J.R. Tolkien's the Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, in Middle Earth and beyond, Numenor, Arnor, etc. And so with that, let's go ahead and introduce each other, and then Brian, I'll have you take over and run the meeting minutes. So go ahead and start with you, Supreme Secretary.
Yes, yes. Hail and well met, all of you. Brian Huseland, and I'm the secretary of this here Smile of the Tolkien Society in the far-flung reaches of the Pacific Northwest. And I've been part of the Tolkien Society locally here with Hawk since about 2009, and so a little bit over 10 years. And it's good to be with all of you today. Who's next?
Greetings, I'm Chris Cooperstein, the farther flung reaches of the Pacific Northwest, out in the desert wastelands of the South Farthing, and happy to be here.
Are they dropping eaves over there in the South Farthing?
There are no eaves to drop, sir. No trees.
Very good.
Although I do need to do some trimming up of the fruit trees and other items around the property, and so yes, I will be dropping some eaves.
Just make sure that you don't be listening into any wizards having private conversations. You might get sent on a quest you didn't volunteer for.
Oh, there have been plenty of quests in the last month or two.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Hello, I'm Anthony Cassette of the East Farthing, and I've been going to these Tolkien Society meetings for the past 3.5 years or so. And I've been a Tolkien fan really since I was a wee lad when the Peter Jackson films started coming out. I kind of read parts of The Two Towers and The Return of the King as the movies were coming out. And since then, I've been kind of loving Tolkien. So
Great. Good to have you with us. Welcome, Chris and Anthony, and of course, our veritable founder, Hawk, who will be back in just a minute. And I'm just sending a quick text to our friend Corey to see if he's able to join us today. And also, I should say that we have regrets or apologies from Sarah in Italy, who is not able to join us today because she is, it's quite late there, actually. It's 10 o'clock. Actually, it's almost 10:30. So she was not able to join us. So anyway, hope to have Sarah back next month. And I have to take the blame as well. Part of the reason why our attendance is low is because I sent the notes right away in December. But what I usually do is I usually kind of remind everybody, a week ahead of time, or at least a few days ahead of time. And this morning it was kind of, the same day. So I think that's probably part of the reason why we're smaller. But hey, it doesn't matter how many a number, whether it be only 4 or 144. We are a full number, how many ever of us meet together. So I'm going to go ahead and read the notes, and you're welcome to follow along. Otherwise, just listen. And if you have any comments that you would like to make while we're going through the notes from last month, just please do either raise your hand. I think there's a raise hand function, and I'll try to stop. Or it's also, there might be some people who when Hawk gets back, have some comments on Facebook, or not Facebook, YouTube, that we could include. So here are the notes from December, the very last Tolkien Society meeting of 2020. After the introduction, I read the November 2020 notes. Oh, I should say we had for attendance Sarah from Italy, Jerry from England, Chris, Anthony, Corey, Hawk, and myself. So quite a nice big group. And anyway, so I read the notes from November and amended the notes. I had talked about the 4 stages of forming, storming, norming, and performing, which relate to role playing, but also to just social groups in general when you're trying to kind of get people to work together in some kind of fashion. And actually the correct author for that is Tuckman. So it's Tuckman's theory or Tuckman's 4 stages. We'd had a discussion about the Amazon Lord of the Rings Prime project. What is the one strict condition and why? So there was speculation was heavy upon what that meant. Goblets of mead were thrown on the floor, gauntlets were laid down, and it wasn't that exciting, but we did have a mild discussion as to what the reason was that the Amazon project was not allowed to use anything really from the 3rd age or the 1st age. So there was some discussion on that. And I'm sure we will want to return to this today in our meeting because there's some developments along those lines for the Amazon Prime series. So, but we can just finish the notes first, I guess, unless you guys wanted to stop now. And then the Northmore project is a project that kind of started up at the end of 2020 because one of Tolkien's houses in Oxford was up for sale, and some people were interested in buying it, and kind of pooling the money together, kind of as almost like a Kickstarter, or more like a GoFundMe kind of campaign to buy this house and turn it into an kind of an artist's kind of a place where people could come and do workshops or something. So I read out loud a statement from the Tolkien Society, of which we are an official Smial, just saying how, as far as officially, the Tolkien Society basically said they were invited to be kind of support that, and they did not. And so they wanted to explain why they didn't, not so much against it, but just saying that they couldn't see that it was really ready to be something to put their time and effort into. Also, the fact that it's not something that would be public for everyone to come to. So anyway, if you want to know more about that, the links are in the notes. And then we each took turns reading a passage that was either funny or inspiring from the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Sarah asked me to read Gandalf's introduction of the dwarves to Beorn as they come in piece by piece, one or two at a time. I read from Farmer Giles of Ham, where the farmer and his neighbors are all coming into his house. So it's kind of a similar situation. So then we were wondering how often this actually happened to Tolkien, where he had people just barging in, and maybe he felt like Beorn or Farmer Giles, depending on the mood. Chris read a selection from On Fairy Stories that was very inspiring. Jerry read a conversation between Gandalf and Pippin. He has been saying many such cheerful things. And then Anthony read from Letters from Father Christmas, December 25, 1929. That was really good. And Corey read a passage from The Ride of the Rohirrim, a conversation between Theoden and Gon-Buri-Gon. Hawk read about Tolkien. It wasn't from Tolkien's writings exactly, but it was from other people writing about his funny, eccentric habits. So the man, so his works, that he could both have a very deep and serious and hopeful side to him that is encouraging in these, divided and chaotic times. And then also a sense of humor, which I would say, and I think probably Chris and Anthony and Hawk would agree, a sense of humor is also very important in chaotic and divided times. So that was really fun. I don't know about you guys, but I really enjoyed that. And then Hawk read letter 180, and we had a discussion about that letter. And then at the end, we wrapped it up and said that the next meeting would be today on January 16th, 2021. And here we are. So those are the meetings. Those are the notes for the meeting of December 19, 2020. Notes are hereby submitted by the secretary. And that's all I had to say there. Any comment relating to the notes before we open it for new issues today? Anthony, go ahead.
I was just had a question on pronunciation. So is it Beorn or Beorn for the Hobbit character?
That's a good.
Well, I remember from the movies at least it was Beorn, but I just noticed you pronounced it Beorn, and I was just wondering which one's the correct one, if there is any.
It might be because of my Norwegian heritage that I say Bjorn. Chris, do you have any idea?
Yes. Attending a church full of Swedes and Norwegians growing up, there were more than one Bjorns in my childhood memory. So, but Beorn, I wonder, might fit the British phoneme rules better.
I'm going to guess that's correct. That the movie got it right. Well, that's about one of the only things that The Hobbit got right, as far as the movies. But I would say, sorry, I had to throw that kick in there. But my Peter Jackson pinata. But I think that Beorn is a more consistent pronunciation when you look at how even names in the common speech, which I would assume that his name was, like Tom Bombadil or others, common speech. It's not identified, as Elvish or Rohirrim or whatever. But they tend to follow the same general rules, except for, well, when you think of like Theoden, there's an example of an E and an O next to each other. It's not Theoden. It's not Theoden or Thoden or whatever, or Theoden. I think the pronunciation Theoden is related to the fact that the Rohirrim are supposed to be, similar to the Anglo-Saxon, and that would just be your standard way of pronouncing it. That's my understanding. But Anthony's question of how do we correctly pronounce Beorn,
Bjorn.
Beorn probably makes more sense. Thoughts?
Yeah, I was actually just looking at the etymology of the word Beorn, and it's an old English word meaning a warrior, a hero, or
Yep.
a man of valor. And it's cognate to the Old Norse word Bjorn, which means bear.
Yep.
And it's a Scandinavian-speaking countries, Bjorn is a personal name attested since the 11th century. So I
Bjorn.
guess the etymologically speaking, it could be Bjorn, but I don't know. I've also heard it as Beorn, so I was just wondering if there was a correct pronunciation.
And for the Swedish people, it's BJO with a slash through it, RN. There is no E, so Bjorn.
And that's more of a y sound.
Yeah.
Bjorn. Yep.
Exactly, a J. Mm-hmm. So that's going to go to the E sound, whereas clearly Tolkien could have written it with a J, and he chose not to. So I think, Anthony, you're right. I think Beorn makes more sense. But as I was saying, Hawk, I'm influenced by my great-grandfather. His name was Gunnar Asbjornsen, and Asbjorn, which was his father's name, Asbjorn, the AS part is what we see in Asgard. It means God or gods. So Asbjorn, so it's basically God bear or bear god. That's a Norse name too. So interesting. Thanks for
So
the question.
there's a tidbit, and maybe you already used this resource. It says in Appendix E, Tolkien makes a mention of how accented vowels are pronounced in Rohan. He says, so also in the case of the personal and place names of Rohan, where they have not been modernized, except that here, Ea and Eo are diphthongs, which may be represented by the Ea of English bear and the Eo of Theobald. And so that would be Theobald if using that. So Bjorn. Now that's one source. That's still a little bit of conjecture, but that there is a bit of a quote there.
Well, it's like Beowulf, right?
Yeah, Beowulf. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be the standard one. But the A sound is Sindarin pronunciation.
Right.
And in that quote from Tolkien, he talks about them being diphthongs rather than that more Sindarin approach.
So one sound.
Yeah.
Wow. Who knew that there was a lot there?
There's a lot of discussion about this, actually. A lot of discussion.
He doesn't fit either as well. I mean, he's not identified with the Rohirrim. But he's part of the languages, common speech, but is related to the free men of the North, the Northmen. So you've got differences between the Rohirrim and the Bardings, or the Lake Men, where that's clearly referring to Norse. I know that there's some notes on that, or the dwarves names, etc. So it seems like he's an anomaly almost.
Yeah, maybe that it does seem to be. So and as far as roots, remember the Rohirrim were originally Northmen, who were granted the lands after the fight, for Calenardon and such that became Rohan. But they were originally Northmen according to the evolution of that culture development in Tolkien's works. So there would be that Northman direct influence, but they do become their own, not just dialect, right? They become very distinctive from their Northman culture in a very short time.
Yes. Good.
Cool.
Any other comments related to the notes?
Anyone?
Bueller?
Chris?
Not as relating to the notes, no.
Okay. Anthony?
Could you remind us what the strict condition was on the production of the Lord of the Rings series on Prime?
Sure. Yeah, so the strict condition was that, and our discussion was based upon the fact that it was reported that Amazon Prime was not allowed to use any content from either the first or the third age of Middle Earth, but had to be restricted only to second age material.
Right.
And so the discussion we had last time had to do with whether, on the one hand, it was because the reasoning was, well, I won't go into all of it again because we don't need to hash it out again, but that was basically it. And then we were kind of talking about why that would be. So, I propose that we move on to something related to the notes, and then we can kind of start our new topic that people want to share. So, if you don't mind, I think I'll just go ahead and give you an update on what we found out about the Amazon Prime series.
Please.
And again, for those who are watching, we are devoted to Tolkien's written works, but we are interested in many different derived works as well, whether those be role-playing games, movies. We're interested in them as they relate back to Tolkien's ideas in the legendary.
As other minds is very much, quoting the other hands and minds quote from
Right.
Tolkien. So we're very interested. We're totally okay with the derivative discussions as well.
And I think it's fair to say that we're always cautiously hopeful that because of that idea that there can be lots of inspiration and new creative outlets and ideas, that we're happy when people faithfully adapt and make something really interesting and new. And so that's why we're kind of doing this, is updating things. And so let me just go ahead and read you what on the onering.net. There is an update from a few days ago. Sarah from Italy actually sent this to me, so hat tip to her. On January 12th, the onering.net reported exclusive official show synopsis for Amazon's Lord of the Rings series. Amazon's, let's see here, what I wanted to read here. Amazon Studios' forthcoming series brings to screens for the very first time the heroic legends of the fabled Second Age of Middle-earth's history. Now, what I'm reading to you is basically what they've, there was an unofficial copy that was sent out or that they found that was from Amazon itself. So this is less kind of speculation and more actual, what
Inside
are they
scoop.
intending? Right, it's a scoop. Yeah.
And in an inside scoop coming to you. Go ahead.
This epic drama is set thousands of years before the events of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and will take viewers back to an era in which great powers were forged. So as you hear this, be thinking, what could they mean here? In which great powers were forged, kingdoms rose to glory and fell to ruin, unlikely heroes were tested, hope hung by the finest of threads, and the greatest villain that ever flowed from Tolkien's pen threatened to cover all the world in darkness. Beginning in a time of relative peace, the series follows an ensemble cast of characters, both familiar and new, as they confront the long-feared re-emergence of evil to Middle-earth. From the darkest depths of the Misty Mountains, to the majestic forests of the elf capital of Lindon, to the breathtaking island kingdom of Numenor, to the furthest reaches of the map, these kingdoms and characters will carve out legacies that live on long after they are gone.
Okay, that's helping narrow it down that it's after the long peace. Okay. Was that...
And that's on to onering.net, so you can all pull that up if you want to look at that and analyze it.
That really helps narrow it down quite a bit.
Let's take this one at a time. So an era in which great powers were forged. Reference to the rings?
Maybe. It might also just be the establishment of the kingdoms of Nargothrond and Malian's
Oh,
Doriath.
Doria.
Nargothrond, Doriath, the Blue Mountain Dwarves in boy, I'm sorry, very little sleep this week with a lot of work. The Blue Mountain Dwarves, they founded their
Belagost and Noglad.
Belagost. Yeah, all of these are founded around roughly the same time, especially during the lengthy peace. I'm trying to remember when that lengthy peace was. That's when they started to let their guard down, and then all of a sudden, whoosh, right? Everything went to heck.
How much of that was one first stage though? Let me think, because Beleriand sinks and that destroys the dwarven city of Nogrod. I thought.
But that's the second age, isn't it? When Numenor. No, am I?
I think that's the end of the first stage, not the beginning of the second. Because the beginning.
Okay, when does? Well, they said Lindon.
Yes, because they would still have an elven kingdom there, because Gil-galad is king there.
Right. So, see, the sinking of Beleriand was. I don't even know if I should. The War of the Wrath. Okay, so Sons of Feanor went east, Thingol, blah, 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 Chief Stronghold of Maedhros, guarded, blah, Aglar's Gap, Erluin, England, Curufin, Celeborn guarded. Only fortress survived the Dagor Bragalach, but in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, the Hill of Himmering was taken over by the soldiers of Ingban. After the drowning of Beleriand during the War of the Wrath, the Peak of Himmering, also called Himmering, remained above the waves as an island. Oh, so that piece. That's an adventure. Okay, so it was during the War of the Wrath.
You're right, though. It is the long peace, is what it's referring to. So we need to look that up. When is the long peace?
Maybe. Well, and so
well,
Chris,
if we go to 2 days later, there is lots of speculation of the editors of the OneRing.net. There is an article that starts to flesh out, well, where would these be? Circa SA 1000, Barad-dûr to SA 1700, when Sauron is shoved out of the wreck of Eriador by Tar Minister and Gil-galad.
Anthony?
Yeah, so I looked at the long piece on Tolkien Gateway, which is a good encyclopedia of Tolkien terms. So long peace is a term referring to the extended peace in Beleriand in the first age, during which Morgoth did not try to break the siege of Angband. It began when Glaurung was defeated in the first age, year 216, and ended with the Dagor Bragalach in 455, lasting 195 years.
And it can't be the first age because they're not allowed to do that.
It's a different it's a what? Maybe it's called the Watchful Peace, or
yeah. But how did? Okay, so War of Wrath is
that's the end of the first age. Yeah?
End of the first age, yeah. So after that,
and the Silmarils are no longer available.
Yeah, there one was in the mouth of one, and one was in the dragon, and one was lost in the ocean.
Right, and one
which I wrote a whole major adventure trying to find the one that was lost in the ocean, with that premise that there were little islands here and there left behind from the past after. So looking at the second. Okay.
Then there's the Watchful piece, which takes place during the Third Age, from Third Age 2063, when Sauron, then known as the Necromancer, fled from Dol Guldur to hide himself from the Wise.
So
Right.
looking at Second Age, Sauron returns to Middle Earth in the east circa 500. A bunch of people are born around that time. Bunch of people. People return to Numenor. Defeated Eldarian voyage.
It's got to be the Golden Age of Numenor. I mean,
Sauron begins the construction of Barad-dûr. Yeah, I mean, if if they're talking if they start in Numenor, the Numenorians are gone for a long time, and they come back after the Middle Earth has fallen into a lot of darkness. That's when the whole gift bringer.
right. So then it's got to start when Numenor is still in its heyday.
The 1200, Gil-galad turns away Anatar, and the Numenorians begin to construct permanent haven. So the Numenorians are back by Second Age 1200. They've been visiting and are now setting up their permanent havens. But I'm looking for any, let's see, when are the battles in this? Battle of Dagorlad's not till 34. Huh. Okay, so 1693, the Three Rings are hidden, and the War of the Elves and Sauron begin. One ring is forged in 1600. Barad-dûr is complete. Sauron openly proclaims himself. Glorfindel, Rhoynar, and Morgoth come to Middle-earth. Now, where is Morgoth during this time? Did he get chained up after the Balerion? That's why
Yes.
Valar came down, grabbed him,
Yes.
and in so doing, they sank Balerion and much of the world. And that's why
Yes.
they didn't want to ever come back and do that again. They do
Right.
sink Numenor, but they don't come back down form after this, how much damage it did. So I'm going to guess between this 1700, because Rings of Power forged in 1500, Sauron departs there again. But it's all fairly peaceful, right? 1200, the Numenorians have come back and started constructing permanent havens, so they're now in their they're getting powerful. The early stages. Rings of Power have been forged, so whether they're talking about great powers are forged, whether they mean that as a pun about all the kingdoms, or whether they mean literally the forging of the rings, that would put that around 1500. Sauron departs.
I think the forging of the rings. I mean, I think even if that's not what it's meant to there,
Yeah.
I think that's a very dramatic moment.
And then the three rings are formed in 1590. One ring is formed in 16. That's so. 1600, one ring is formed. Barad-dûr is completed. Sauron openly proclaims himself. Glorfindel, Rhoynar, and Morgoth come to Middle Earth. In 1693, the Three Rings are hidden, and the War of the Elves and Sauron begin.
Okay, so the piece would be before that. You're talking about when Sauron is seducing Celebrimbor and the Gwaith y Myrdain. He's trying to kind of worm his way into, teaching them the craft. He's Anatar. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what it's dealing with.
But in 1200, Rennie and Gil-galad turned away Anatar.
Right.
Oh, but then we move to 1500, the Rings of Power are forged. Sauron then leaves in 1500. 1590, Three Rings are forged, and 1600, the One Ring is forged. So my guess is that 1600, because Sauron openly proclaims himself, Three Rings are hidden 93 years later, and the War of the Rings. So somewhere around 1600, 1693 would seem logical. It's relatively peaceful up till 1693. That's when war begins. Up till that, I don't see any real war. There's nothing war-wise.
Mm-hmm. So it ends. The peace ends in 1693.
1693 is when the war between the elves and Sauron began.
And that's because that's when Celebrimbor hides the rings and Sauron.
He hid the three rings. Yes, same year. Yeah, that was
1693. Okay.
1693.
Can we go back? And so we've said an era where great powers were forged could be literal or figurative.
Yeah.
If it's the rings, we're talking right around the 1500s.
Yep.
Second age.
Yep.
Kingdoms rose to glory and fell to ruin. That's clearly a reference to Numenor, right? Unless there's other kingdoms we don't. I mean, no other kingdom would have been ruined in the Second Age. Elven kingdoms, I don't.
Well,
think.
when Numenor fell, it washed many of the coastal stuff were impinged and wiped out. It did do serious harm when the waves from Numenor.
And that's can Anthony or Chris look up the date of the drowning of Numenor, please?
Well, that's like 2220. That's right near the end of this. Let's see. It was
And then unlikely heroes were tested. What do you think that's referring to?
Well, that's probably the characters that they're creating. They're probably creating new characters that not your expected.
Which is kind of where you've got that room, right? Because many people could have been part of that, and so you can have
downfall of Numenor was 3319.
Yep. That seems to be the question mark from the staff comments on the OneRing.net is, well, we don't know very much about these heroes, and it doesn't appear that because they need to not so Tolkien's whole idea of the Hobbit being the one that is carrying all the burden of responsibility of saving Middle Earth versus all these powerful kings or not so powerful kings,
right? The unlikely hero,
Third Age, and so that's what it's going to look like. Is you've got all these powers going on. You've got the establishment of the 9 kingdoms and the 9 kingdoms of men and the elves, and you've got all these kingdoms, and it seems to be typical Norse lore that the story is not really about them. The story is about this unsung hero over here.
Right.
Yeah. Right. 1693 seems a great time. So much coming, right? It's a time of action. Now the tension. You're going to have the sacking. 1694 war begins. 5 Sauron invite. 97 the sack of Eregion. Death of Celebrimbor. Rivendell is founded. Dwarves assail Sauron from behind. Khazad-dûm closes. 1699 Sauron overruns Erebor. 1700 of Sauron by the new star. Sauron driven from Erebor. First White Council held. Galadriel and Celeborn to Elphalis. 1690 onward. It's all of that epic stuff.
Is that enough for 5 seasons?
I could keep going. We have another
Peter Jackson.
We have 1,500 more years of major events going on. So and eventually, Sauron being taken prisoner by the Númenóreans and all that near the end. So if they don't want to jump straight to the end of the Second Age, year before capture Sauron, and however many years it was, capture Sauron, renders prisoner, but he bleeds poison in the ears of Pharaoh's own. Have the development of the king's Morgothian faithful being all that nasty. Moses are all leaving. That's towards the end. That's all 30, 33. that's like the end of all of it. So, about the decision makers, if they say a long piece is broken, that's 60. Literally do it, but they could pick any year after that. That a lot of different events. That would be the War of Sauron and the Elves, and Eredor and their allies. First, he tried during the Second Age to up the eyes of Anatar, instructed the elves of Regen power, Mordor, and then secretly One Ring. If the elves had made so that when Sauron took up his centuries, that would be frustrating. But he could not control by subtlety. Sauron resolved to destroy by force. War of the Elves and Sauron in second. This says 1695. A little bit of discrepancy. Gateway between 95 is when he invades Eric. Rings are hidden in 16. Listed as the Lord of the Ring, but the first action they want to start with action. Stacking of Sauron's vast armies emerged from Mordor and invaded, or passing through Caladan and turning north. Now, isn't that what we ran with saving the big one, the weather top? I'm blanking.
The Palantir?
Palantir, yeah. Remember Weathertop's Palantir? We did a whole adventure where you were sent to from Weathertop, the Palantir. Of course, they neglected to mention that particular Palantir monstrously 5 or 6. That Brian?
I do.
That was during this invasion. It was a time period.
Right.
Lot of material there because that's when all of that started collapsing.
Well, I thought the assault on Weathertop was earlier in the Third Age in like 1976.
Oh, was it?
The Witch of Angmar. Yeah.
Oh, I've got that completed, I guess.
Well,
different attack. Okay. My bad.
No, it's okay. It's because they both include Eriador. I think that's the hard part. Is
multiple invasions.
You've got and we know. Well, do we know? I mean, would the 9? No, the 9 wouldn't be involved at all yet because he has to take the. So he gets the rings.
He has to wait for them to.
Well, that's true. They have to be enwraithed, right?
Yeah.
He goes away, presumably, after he captures them from Celebrimbor, right? I've got low bandwidth. I'm going to have to take off my video here.
Yeah. So when news of so aids in 1605 in Eredor, passing through Caladan and turning north to Regen. When news of the invasion arrived to Gil-galad, he sent a force commanded by Elrond from Lindon to reinforce Eregion as well as word to Númenor. Elrond's forces were held back by Sauron's greater host. Regen was destroyed in 7. Ostinedil fell, with Celebrimbor himself leading the last desperate steps of that. He was taken captive by the orcs, and the Dark Lord demanded that the Rings of Power be turned over to him, as well as the 3 rings. Later, Celebrimbor was shot through orc arrows, and by counts, Sauron used Celebrimbor's body as a banner as he turned. Sauron gathered up the ring power that remained, except for the 3 rings, which were far from Eregion. Laid waste the land of Eregion, end to it. Surviving elves of Eregion seemed scattered, as there are various accounts of their. Some fled northward to join Elrond's host. That host was itself forced. The elves of Eregion settled at Imladris when Elrond founded afterward. Joined the others of their kind who wild, only later found their way to safety. Many of these people later Other survivors escaped into passage by dwarves. Okay, that's over the next
Good.
6 years. Sauron's armies overran area west, take Linden. Sauron's victory, great navy north carried north, sent by King our minister. Sauron's army rout and fort westlands. So Eriador was saved. Celebrimdor's kingdom wiped out. Great many of the
Okay, so that includes another kingdom then that would be ruined, yeah?
Ah.
And then you also have the entrance that would be perhaps they might enter the Numenorians kind of come in, the cavalry comes and saves the day sort
Yeah,
of.
because that's a 6 year window right there of battles. And
That's
a
all-
lot
that's-
happens.
Oh yeah, and it's way before Numenor captures Sauron. We're talking centuries
Yeah.
before all that. Chris,
So-
can I ask you, Chris? You've got that other article up. So what do they think "Hope hung by the finest of threads" is referring to? Do they have anything on that?
Let me check here.
I just wanted to speculate with you guys.
Yeah, I didn't in my reading through it.
Or Hawk and Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, it doesn't mention it, finest of threads.
I mean, what would be the most critical time period in the Second Age where hope hung by the finest of threads?
Well, I mean, Linden was about to be overrun, and if not for the Numenorians, all of Western fallen.
True.
They had not shown. Not in the ring.
Right. If the Elven rings had been taken, I mean, can you imagine what Sauron would have done with those? I mean, what would he have done?
The exact converse of what the elves had just done to him.
Do we have any idea when the series will premiere?
They have to premiere this year because that was the deal, and they have to abide by the license that I think the beginning of at least season 1 or whatever they want to do has to be broadcast before the end of this year. And I thought they finished filming season 1, or maybe it's just the first episode.
I think it was, they said like 1 or 2 episodes already been shot and were.
That was before COVID-19, yeah.
Rest they were bubble and so the Nazgul don't appear.
2251. Thank you. Good to. Well, that would be another. That'd be another great. I mean, that whole story arc there.
That's when the Elven tongue were sworn in Numenor by King.
Oh wow. And that's just clearly where he's working in the. I mean, here he's
Fiddling
doing
away at their.
Yeah. Okay. What about
No
this?
release date yet, and it looks like they're saying expected 2021, even though, you know, I would imagine you could argue force majeure on 2020 and delay half a year.
Yeah.
So the other one is the death of Tar Palantir, and then our Pharazôn seizes the scepter. Remember? That's in 3255. Now we're getting near the end. We still have from 3255 when that happened. Downfall of Numenor 30 at half a century. Play with there.
Yep.
Our Pharazôn lands at Umbar, takes Sauron as prisoner. Great armament begins. Amandil sails to Aman. Or the death. But I hope they don't go. You know, of course, 34, 30.
Sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
really the 16 a really good starting place. All the politics, all the different groups rally together. No, we can do it ourselves, right? That was the problem. Ourselves and not that much easier supporting each other, not for the new. Oh, I would love. I hope they. I don't know if in today's culture they'll do it, but I would love to finally see the Moses in Godine. I've always just really. They're the only uncorrupted culture, only ones who never.
Yeah. I think it's doable if they make them different enough, right? I mean, Avatar did Avatar get a lot of grief? I mean,
Oh,
it
that
relative.
was 20 years ago.
That's true. 20 years ago was like
Things
almost a
are
century.
very different.
Yep.
Tolkien did do the noble sacrifice.
Yep.
Nordic is
Yeah. Yeah.
might not step on. Might do. Game of Thrones was able to do the both Rocky and I don't know. It depends on how brave they're willing. um,
If they can garner enough public support, I mean, if you have,
they can handle it
say,
respectfully.
yeah, well, if you have some clear and easy things that show up later that people would be familiar with who don't know the books as well. For example, you have Rivendell, you have the Rings of Power. That'll be very interesting. Uh, Even the doorway in between, going from Holland, Elregion, Celebrimbor's land, where the dwarves were such good friends with the elves. They built this door, and the entrance through into Khazad-dûm. That's where some of these refugees go. That door, they could see that door, the moon letters. I mean, it's just like, oh, there's these little pieces. Now, this is before the wizards, so there's no wizards in Middle Earth at this point because that's Third Age. But Glorfindel, did you say Glorfindel is there already?
Glorfindel comes north in 16.
Okay, so he's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1695 is Sauron invades. That's when all the action might be a little. If they do a little bit of pre of rings, Anatar, outtakes showing forging of the and connect people. How is this connected for the rings? Well, like they do the precursors in the PJ movies, flashback to the Alliance, right? The world is changing. That flashback, end of the Second Age. That would be a way to connect people. How is this connected for the ring? Here's the rings that are referenced, right? Show Anatar being, the suave character trying to lure them a couple little jumps in time and get to openly elf and 6 got years or of hopelessness. Forces are completely overwhelming. Every single battle.
Yeah. And remember too, right, you've also got the fact that you can do that kind of building up of suspense pretty easily because you can do that kind of compressed time because we're talking about people that live, these peoples live for centuries anyway, so you can easily get in the beginning of their first series kind of a little bit of that backdrop, you know, and then leading, and even in the first episode, perhaps, where he becomes aware of, you know, Sauron creates the One Ring, and Celebrimbor becomes aware of his designs, and
Oh.
so
Unlikely Heroes is such a clear. Odds are that means the characters they are creating know Tolkien's canon. That's what's most likely.
which they can do what they want then without
Yeah.
running into trouble. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I have a question for you guys. So maybe Anthony or Chris want to comment on this. So the last part of this so-called official release says, from the darkest depths of the misty mountains to the majestic forests of the elf capital of Lindon, to the breathtaking island kingdom of Numenor, to the furthest reaches of the map, these kingdoms and characters will carve out legacies that live on long after they are gone. So I let's say that these aren't throwaway lines. The depths of misty mountains, Chris,
Well-
or no, I'm gonna see what Chris and Anthony think about this. What do you guys think first?
Well, my guess is that they're probably going to take an approach similar to what they did with the video game Middle Earth: Shadow of Mordor, and probably its sequel Middle Earth: Shadow of War, where they, you know, have kind of the background and the setting of Tolkien's Middle Earth, and then kind of throw in new elements such as new characters. If what Hawk is saying about the unlikely heroes is correct, then we'll have new characters alongside the already existing characters like Celebrimbor, who also plays a pretty prominent role in the video game Middle Earth: Shadow of Mordor. Because Celebrimbor, if I'm not mistaken, made the Rings of Power, all of them except for the One Ring, right? And so I'm guessing Celebrimbor is going to play a pretty prominent role, because isn't he like the king of Lindon or ruler of Lindon or something like that?
It'll be like Elrond during the Lord of the Rings, probably equivalent.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's all I have to speculate on. So.
And I wonder, do we know if they cast what's his name Cage movies as Elrond? Agent Smith.
Hugo Weaving.
Yeah, Hugo Weaving.
I'm pretty sure he said no.
Okay,
So
that's fine. He's getting a little old there for.
Yeah. You can't retcon wrinkles.
Yeah, they do. They do. No, they CGI that all the time now. It's a little creepy, but they do it all the time now. You see it in Tron and a few others where they take the imagery from the version, superimpose it, and they.
In Star Wars, they do that.
Yeah.
So what about this line, to the furthest reaches of the map? I mean, that's not talking about Numenor there.
Mordor.
It is talking about Numenor on the new map.
Well, but it already mentions it. It says the breathtaking island kingdom of Numenor, and to the furthest reaches of the map. So
On
two different things.
Yeah, I mean, if they're starting with Numenor, if they're starting with our Pharaoh's own, and he's building up the forces, getting ready to invade Amon, that would put it there. But the Numenorians, anytime with the Numenorians, once they start to explore and they establish their havens, they explore all of. Remember, they go all the way to the other islands without going west. They go to all the continents, all the way around the map, settling everywhere. But as far as the Middle Earth map, that would be, Mordor and Rhûn, all the way west to Numenor, south to Arad, as far as the core map.
Yeah.
So carve out legacies that live on long after they have gone. And I'm staring at a picture of the Argonath and the gates into Mordor and all these other kind of the carving up of Middle Earth into different kingdoms in a sense. It almost feels like balkanization, if you will.
But the Argonauts that was the edge of Gondor.
Yes,
So
that's what I mean.
that's
the
all
gate.
Third Age.
Um, I'm not sure when they're carved, but
Kingdoms in Exile.
right. Well, yeah, because Elendil. Well, yeah, but the second age includes the settling of Middle Earth by Elendil and Isildur and Anarion.
Yes,
So
and
that could be the conclusion at the very very end of.
so you see in Jackson's movies all of these ruins, and some of them aren't just Third Age ruins. Is I guess my point.
Right. Right. Okay. Anything else on this?
The Argonauts were built Third Age, 1248, after regent of Namasul I, Minilcar, led a great force and defeated the Easterlings between Rovanion and the Sea of Rune. Third Age, 1248. When he returned, he fortified banks of the Anduin and built the pillars of the Argonath.
Right. Okay. So shall we move on then? Was there any new comments? That was really good discussion, guys. Thank you. Anything about another comment that anybody wanted to make about other issues or things related to Tolkien's writings?
Well, yes, the Project Northmore. There's a decent BBC article out there that essentially talks through the crowdfunding campaign from its positive sides, and one of the things that is a little mystifying to me is the person who set it up was Julia Golding, who doesn't seem to have a bunch of relationships to Tolkien other than she was at Oxford for a long time and did her own literary career. But fans, including Ian McKellen, Martin Freeman, Annie Lennox, John Howe, John Rhys Davies, Sir Derek Jacobi, they're all pushing to raise funds for the house. The goal is a minimum of 4.5 million pounds sterling. That's the asking price for the house. And the house was listed as a grade 2 listed status. So grade 2 listed is very similar to our Register of Historic Places, which Spokane has a ton of Register of Historic Places homes.
Yeah, grade 1 is the most valuable, I believe.
Yeah, and the thing that I heard last month that I haven't been able to find in the articles is any restriction that requires the house to actually be lived in. I understand that it's part of a neighborhood. I understand all those types of neighborhood restrictions, but I don't necessarily see this requirement of being lived in. But they essentially have 3 months to raise the funds, or else other buyers will be able to purchase the home.
Okay. Thanks for, if you can send me that link, Chris, that'd be really good.
Yes.
And I'm just going to ask that you kind of follow this as it develops, if you don't mind kind of reporting back on that.
Yeah. The idea here is to actually have what does it say? A letter. There is no center devoted to Tolkien anywhere in the world, which is, I mean, there's the Lewis. So there's the C.S. Lewis Center in Chicago and various other centers for other authors, and there doesn't seem to be one for Tolkien. And so the goal here is to create a center devoted to Tolkien, and likely it could be the 6-bedroom house.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. And that just to make that clear to everyone, this is the house in which Tolkien wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, apparently. So that's part of
Yeah.
the draw. Okay. All right. Anthony, can I ask if you'd be willing at our next meeting to kind of give us an update on if you hear anything more on the Amazon Prime Lord of the Rings project? Would that be something you'd be interested in kind of keeping an eye on for us?
Yeah, sure. already got the OneRing.net website bookmarked on my browser.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's just good to look under Google, under news, under the news tab, and just type in. Sometimes if you type in Amazon and Middle Earth or Amazon and Tolkien, something like that, you'll find if anything's been released. Because I didn't even know about this, to be honest, until Sarah helpfully kind of sent it to me. So that's nice to have somebody kind of on that. I appreciate that. For next meeting, that'd be great. Thank you. Hawk, so we have the next letter we could read, unless you have something else you would like to talk about.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. And while you were gone, I mentioned at the beginning that Sarah just was too tired, and so she sent her regrets that she's not able to join it, and also that I took the ownership of the fact that because I was late in getting the word out and reminding everybody, that would have helped, I'm sure, with how many people we had, but. We
do what we can.
We happy few, we band of brothers. There's a little Shakespeare for you. Henry V.
Who wants to do the reading? Where are we at? What letter are we at?
181.
Said 181.
That's correct. 181.
Okay, the long one.
Well,
we should probably break that up into pieces, switch between people. Who wants to start?
I can.
Okay, great.
This is letter 181.
Yep.
Yeah, just like half a page.
Okay.
Hand it off to the next person.
Okay, so this is letter 181 to Michael Straight. These are drafts, apparently, and it's prefaced by Humphrey Carpenter's comment. Before writing a review of The Lord of the Rings, Michael Straight, the editor of New Republic, wrote to Tolkien asking a number of questions. First, whether there was a meaning in Gollum's role in the story and in Frodo's moral failure at the climax. Second, whether the scouring of the Shire chapter was directed especially to contemporary England. And third, why the other voyagers should depart from the Grey Havens with Frodo at the end of the book. Is it for the same reason that there are those who gain the victory but cannot enjoy it? And the letter's not dated, but it's probably written between January and February 1956. Dear Mr. Straight, thank you for your letter. I hope that you have enjoyed The Lord of the Rings. Enjoyed is the key word, for it was written to amuse in the highest sense, to be readable. There is no allegory, moral, political, or contemporary in the work at all. It is a fairy story, but one written according to the belief I once expressed in an extended essay on fairy stories that they are the proper audience for adults. Because I think that fairy story has its own mode of reflecting truth, different from allegory or sustained satire or realism, and in some ways more powerful. But first of all, it must succeed just as a tale, excite, please, and even on occasion move, and within its own imagined world be accorded literary belief. To succeed in that way was my primary object. But of course, if one sets out to address adults, mentally adult people anyway, they will not be pleased, excited, or moved unless the whole or the incidents seem to be about something worth considering, more, for example, than mere danger and escape. There must be some relevance to the human situation of all periods. So something of the teller's own reflections and values will inevitably get worked in. This is not the same as allegory. We all, in groups or as individuals, exemplify general principles, but we do not represent them. The hobbits are no more an allegory than are, say, the pygmies of the African forest. Gollum is to me just a character or an imagined person who, granted the situation, acted so and so under opposing strains, as it appears to be probable that he would. And there is always an incalculable element in any individual, real or imagined. Otherwise, he or she would not be an individual, but a type. I
Oh,
would.
can I make a comment?
Oh, go ahead.
I found it really interesting what he said there about how at the top of that paragraph, um, they will not be pleased, excited, or moved unless the whole or the incident seem to be about something worth considering, um, more than mere danger and escape. And I thought that's so interesting because most of the movies nowadays, which is the main medium in which people read, have stories. So the stories that people digest or consume are, a lot of them are about mere danger and escape in a sense. And I thought that's an interesting kind of, I don't know, maybe an indictment on our time, because
Yep.
he's saying, well, at least the mentally adult people would want more than that.
Yep.
So, what does that say about our time then?
Oh yeah. Don't get me started.
Should I continue reading, or should we hand it off to someone else?
Oh, let's hand it on.
Okay.
What about Tobold Hornblower there from the South Farthing? You want to read?
I'm still waiting for my NAS to boot up.
Okay.
I had turned
Hawk,
it off.
did you want to?
All right. I will try and answer your specific questions. The final scene of the quest was so shaped simply because, having regard to the situation and to the characters of Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, those events seemed to be mechanically, morally, and psychologically credible. But, of course, if you wish for more reflection, I should say that within the mode of the story, the catastrophe exemplifies an aspect of the familiar words. Quote, "Give us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." End. Lead us not into temptation, etc., is the harder and the less often considered petition. The view in the terms of my story is that though every event or situation has at least two aspects, the history and development of the individual, it is something out of which he can get good, ultimate good for himself or fail to do so, and the history of the world, which depends on his action for his sake, still there are abnormal situations in which one may be placed, sacrificial situations, call them, such as positions in which the good of the world depends on the behavior of an individual in circumstances which demand of him suffering and endurance far beyond the normal, even, it may have, speaking, demand a strength of body and mind which he does not possess. He is, in a sense, doomed to failure, doomed to fall to temptation, or be broken by pressure against his will. That is, against any choice he could make or would make unfettered, not under the duress. Frodo was in such a prison, an apparently complete trap. A person of greater native power could probably never have resisted the ring's lure to power so long. A person of less power could not hope to resist it in the final decision. Already, Frodo had been unwilling to harm the ring before he set out, and was incapable of. A lot to
But you know what
unpack
that
in
makes me
that.
think, Hawk?
There's a lot to unpack in all of that.
Yeah, I was just. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, he talking about the catastrophe aspect, the I love the mechanically, morally, and psychologically credible. Not one, that it's an and. They all need to be story mechanics, environment, and internal consistency. That it's morally credible for the motivations of the characters involved, and that they're psychologically. And he talks about the duress, the sacrificial situations, and that balance between very powerful and very weak, and just enough of the two to be able to survive just incredibly traumatic, ongoing, one thing after another, right? That adventure is over a year long, around a year long. And yes, there are a few brief respites here, but boy, was there a lot of trauma there. a lot of death, a lot of fear, ongoing, constantly grinding you down. And that has a real, right, you finally get there, been through all of that, and you're going to be exhausted. And here you have this spiritual ring force, right, trying to push you. And you've spent everything you have. He never planned to come back, never planned to survive a one-way sacrificial thing, and needing to have the reserves to finish the task. If not for Sam, failed to do.
Yeah, I mean, we just started reading the Lord of the Rings to Patience, my 8-year-old. That's when we usually read to our kids, the Lord of the Rings, and I'm really struck by how even at the very beginning when he goes to Crickhollow, Frodo knows that he's not coming back. He says to Sam at the very beginning when Sam's talking about going with him, because Gandalf said, you need to watch him. He said, but Sam, it's not there and back again like with Bilbo. I'm going on a journey that in which the end is not clear, but it's likely that we will never come back to the Shire. It's so clear even at the beginning to him that this is, and I mean he's hopeful that he can go to Rivendell and then
End it off there.
Somebody else can take it up, right?
Yeah.
But he knows
he's got some foreboding.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
I may be misremembering. It's been a while since my last reread, and correct me if right in this moment, my perception between Bilbo's quest and Frodo's quest is Bilbo's quest is an adventure of restoration, where Frodo's is destruction. It's destroying evil, but it's still an adventure of destruction. And Bilbo, though he was really unwilling and kind of egged on into joining, pretty much complained the whole way, had overall a more optimistic view, that took towards the adventure. Whereas Frodo, despite the Peter Jackson version making Frodo was much more steeled to, he was much more fatalistic and steeled to finishing the task at all cost, not optimistic, or much more less whiny, but also much more pessimistic. Bilbo was more whiny, but much more optimistic. Am I plating anything there, or how do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that sounds accurate to me. What do you guys think?
I was thinking of the stealing for the task in World War II and the letters to his son Christopher and that fatherly advice that had been given, and Frodo potentially being or Christopher being a type of Frodo.
Whereas Bilbo was Tolkien self, Frodo was a reflection of Frodo.
That is my reading into it. Although there is no allegory in this book at all.
But certainly the old man who sees his son in the thick of things wishes he could do more. I think he was an air raid warden or something.
Yeah, while London is being bombed into rubble.
Yeah,
is a much grimmer.
Yeah, I mean he's in Oxford at least, so he's a little further away. But they were under that threat too. And I found the selection. So this is kind of connected to what you're saying, Hawk. But this is in chapter 4, a shortcut to mushrooms. I'll just read this short piece here. Anyway. From Frodo's mind, the bright morning, treacherously bright, he thought, had not banished the fear of pursuit, and he pondered the words of Gildor, the elf. The merry voice of Pippin came to him. He was running on the green turf and singing. No, I could not, he said to himself. It is one thing to take my young friends walking over the Shire with me, until we are hungry and weary, and food and bed are sweet. To take them into exile, where hunger and weariness may have no cure, is quite another, even if they are willing to come. The inheritance is mine alone. I don't think I ought even to take Sam. He looked at Sam Gamgee and discovered that Sam was watching him. Well, Sam, Frodo said, what about it? I am leaving the Shire as soon as ever I can. In fact, I've made up my mind now not even to wait a day at Crickhollow, if it can be helped. Very good, sir. You still mean to come with me? I do. It is going to be very dangerous, Sam. It is already dangerous. Most likely neither of us will come back. If you don't come back, sir, then I shan't, that's certain, said Sam. Don't you leave him, they said to me. Leave him, I said. I never mean to. I'm going with him if he climbs to the moon. And if any of those black riders try to stop him, they'll have Sam Gamgee to reckon with, I said. They laughed. Who are they, and what are you talking about? The elves, sir. And then Sam goes on talking about elves. But he says later on, Frodo sees in Sam something old, something a little wiser, and he says, do you feel any need to leave the Shire now that your wish to see them has come true already? And Sam says, yes, sir, I don't know how to say it, but after last night I feel different. I seem to see ahead in a kind of way. I know we are going to take a very long road into darkness, but I know I can't turn back. It isn't to see elves now, nor dragons, nor mountains that I want, which is kind of Bilbo, right?
Yeah.
I don't rightly know what I want, but I have something to do before the end, and it lies ahead, not in the Shire. I must see it through, sir, if you understand me. And that's kind of the end of that.
So with Frodo, despite the Peter Jackson compression, when Gandalf does the ring test in the flames and Frodo know that he suspects this ring is he's not certain, he still has to go to Gondor and do the archives, but he warns Frodo he could keep it that. Then 17 years go by before everything starts to hit the fan, right? When the ring wraiths and start showing up. Frodo left to head to danger, but his homeland was not threatened. Frodo, the malice came to his home. He knew that it was because of him, and that to lead the malice away from Shire couldn't come back as long as they pursued him. So that fatalism and that exile that was your passage realizes that as long as he's pursued, he can't come back to the Shire. But anybody who goes with him or danger. So it's, again, his home front has, whereas Bilbo went towards the danger, perfectly safe. Maybe that contributes to some of that. What are your thoughts?
Not sure.
I mean, because it's I have to go. I don't really. Bilbo was a little excited because when the Tookaside awoke, and he's heading into danger, but there's no threat to his homeland. Frodo does not want to go. He does not want to go on the adventure, but he decides he has to in place that he much more fatalism rather than
I don't think there's anything in Frodo that's waking in the sense that
exactly.
Bilbo being
unlike Sam,
farmer, kind of a farmer Giles of Ham.
Yeah,
it's much more Smith and Wooten Major, much more. It's almost like as a Geas or a Geas is placed upon him. He. It's interesting too in the Shadow of the Past, where you're talking about that scene. Actually, he comes back and he throws the ring in the fire, and they see the writing on it. And it's interesting how Gandalf frames this, because Gandalf has never said you have to do it. He says, we have to get it out of here. And he says there's only one way to destroy it: to find the cracks of doom in the depths of Orodruin, the fire mountain, and cast the ring in there. If you really wish to destroy it, to put it beyond the grasp of the enemy forever. He's almost kind of like putting it out there for Frodo, like, if you really wanted to get rid of it, this is what you would have to do, hypothetically speaking. And then Frodo says, I do really wish to destroy it, cried Frodo, or, well, to have it destroyed. I am not made for perilous quests. I wish I'd never seen the ring. Why did it come to me? Why was I chosen? I don't think we have a sense in the Hobbit of Bilbo being chosen, although I suppose that he was
challenged.
Yeah.
They got his dander up. But
I wonder if there might be something else going on here as well. There's kind of this. So Frodo is the spoiled nephew.
mhm.
He is a person who um, has never had a want in the world. Uh, uh, we um, we call these inheritance or trust bunnies.
Trust fund
So
baby.
trust fund baby. Yes, that would be a part. It's not the whole story, but it is a part of his life situation. And so he's looking at his uncle who has gone there and back again and did something amazing. And uh, he he's sitting there having done nothing. And and so there is this desire in him to do something great that um, it's almost guilt for not having to have done anything. So okay, now it's my turn, let's go. Otherwise he sees what his life will become, uh, similar to that of which his uncle has turned out to be, and he doesn't necessarily want that road for himself.
Well, I was just thinking, not to commit the cardinal sin of using allegory in Tolkien's works, but um, I think Frodo's whole journey kind of reminds me of that of Jesus in the Gospels, where it kind of reminds the idea that Frodo doesn't necessarily want to bear this burden of destroying the ring of the salvation of the world. And I think Tolkien will be talking about this in the letter, but it kind of reminds me of the episode in the Garden of Gethsemane. How's that word?
Take this burden away from him.
Jesus is sweating blood and praying to his Father in heaven, saying, "Oh Lord, can you take this cup away from me? Take this burden away from me." And so I think, not to use this hackneyed word, Christ figure, but I think Frodo could be construed as sort of a Christ figure in that sense, and that there's this kind of inevitability that this whole sort of salvation episode or salvific episode is going to happen, where this one figure is going to try to save the world. Um, that's kind of my comment on what Tolkien is sort of talking about in this first part of the letter.
Okay. Right.
Sorry, here I am.
Okay.
Sorry, I meant to say thanks, Anthony, because I was thinking about what you were saying, that um, that's the very opposite of like the grasping after power that Sauron kind of embodies, or even like when Frodo says to Gandalf in at Bag End, he says, "Then you take it. You did, and Gandalf
Right.
says,
No, no,
"Do
no,
not."
no, no.
Right. I would seek to use it for good ends. So
And
it's really, yeah.
Galadriel too.
Right. So it certainly is. There is this deep sense, and I think it's meaningfulness. I would say it's deeper than allegory, right? Because allegory can only mean one-to-one correspondence. This is that. But when it's deeper, it has, as Hawk has mentioned before, applicability as well. And I think what's beautiful here is it is this inspiring sense in which um, someone is going into great peril at very little benefit to themselves, but for the sake of others. And that's really refreshing, because I would say, yes, superheroes are still popular, and it's kind of a requirement of superheroes that they have to, while they're kicking butts, they're saving somebody. But notice how often these somebodies are kind of this nameless mob of city people in New York. I don't know. Maybe I've watched too many Avengers movies. Um, you know, but when you see people and I think that Tolkien understood this. And I think that there's something here that's really powerful. Lead us not into temptation, but the opposite would be someone is led into temptation or into um, the threat of obliteration for the sake of others. And this is consistently where Tolkien's heroes show themselves to be different, not because they're born to a noble family necessarily, but it's the ennoblement that comes about, like Sam, somebody
Or
who.
sorry, I thought you were pausing. So
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead. I'm pausing for
Or
you.
Socrates virtuous.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, when we look at somebody like Turambar in the first age, and we contrast that with, say, um, Beren, I don't know, someone else like that, we would say, well, Turambar has a lot of great things about him. He's a tragic hero. But I think one of the greatest failings there is that while he does go into peril and he does do it for others, there's always an angle, right? It's either his grief
Yeah.
or his wrath or his whatever. It's always basically
Oh,
about
him.
Turin.
Yeah, I mean,
Turin
it
because
was that rewrite of Kalevala, the section on Lervo,
right, right.
all of it. And Turin is way more likable than Kalervo. You actually feel for the tragedies but he
Yeah,
was still based on the incredibly selfish character of Kalervo,
yeah,
which
yeah.
you don't feel any sympathy for because he does all these horrible things and then goes, "Why is everybody always picking on me?"
Nice quote there. I feel like Faramir and Boromir also, you look at that, where
Yeah.
Boromir is that conflicted figure who wants, why not take this thing to Minas Tirith and only use it at great need? But Faramir is willing to ride, and I might be conflating the movies with the books now, but I think in the books as well, he rides to Osgiliath in a final, there's a sense in which he is dying because he's going out and he's willing basically to quote throw away his life. But there's great dread, and Frodo has that dread. No wonder it's pessimistic or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and definitely it's part of the much darker theme of the Lord.
So we won't get through this letter by the end, but maybe we can get to a good stopping point. What do you think that would be? Maybe everybody could have a chance to read. Who has not read yet?
Chris and Brian.
I can read this time.
Great.
Let's see. The quest was bound to fail as a piece of world plan, and also was bound to end in disaster as the story of humble Frodo's development to the noble, his sanctification. Fail it would and did, as far as Frodo considered alone was concerned. He apostatized, and I have had one savage letter crying out that he should have been executed as a traitor, not honored.
Oh,
Wow.
Believe
Wow.
me, it was not until I read this that I had myself any idea of how topical such a situation might appear. It arose naturally from my plot conceived in main outline in 1936. Someone can look up footnote 1. I did not foresee that before the tale was published, we should enter a dark age in which the technique of torture and disruption of personality would rival that of Mordor the Ring and present us with the practical problem of honest man of goodwill broken down into apostates and traitors.
yeah, this is
But
really relevant, eh?
oh,
Because like in Norway, where my great grandfather was born, the it was very close by. Well, there's this guy named Quisling, right? Victor Quisling. He was a Norwegian who basically collaborated with the Nazis um, to betray his government so that they would be able to easily take the capital. And then the exchange was that he would get to be a puppet governor, kind of like. And people feel pretty strongly about even the term quisling means a traitor, or we have our own, right? Benedict Arnold. Even that he did a great amount of good in the war and helped fight the British and win in several instances,
That's all out the window.
Yeah.
That footnote is a, is a reference to a reference to a reference. Oh my goodness. So footnote 1 for 181 says, but see note 5 to number 131. So I jumped to 131. Okay, never mind. That's because I was reading note 1. Okay, sorry. 5. As earlier letters in this book
Does
show,
that make it a toe note?
as earlier letters in this book show, The Lord of the Rings was in fact begun in December 1937. Anyway, go ahead and continue.
All right. But at this point, the salvation of the world and Frodo's own salvation is achieved by his previous pity and forgiveness of injury. At any point, any prudent person would have told Frodo that Gollum would certainly betray him and could rob him in the end. To pity him, to forbear, to kill him was a piece of folly, or a mystical belief in the ultimate value in itself of pity and generosity, even if disastrous in a world of time. He did rob him and injure him in the end, but by a grace, that last betrayal was at a precise juncture when the final evil deed was the most beneficial thing anyone could have done for Frodo. By a situation created by his forgiveness, he was saved himself and relieved of his burden. He was very, very justly accorded the highest honors, since is clear that he and Sam never concealed the precise course of events. Into the ultimate judgment upon Gollum, I would not care to inquire. This would be to investigate God's privity.
God's privity.
God's privity. Okay. As the medievals said, Gollum was pitiable, but he ended in persistent wickedness, and that the fact that this worked good was no credit to him. His marvelous courage and endurance, as great as Frodo and Sam's, or greater, being devoted to evil, was portentous, but not honorable. I am afraid, whatever our beliefs, we have to face the fact that there are persons who yield to temptation, reject their chances of nobility or salvation, and appear to be damnable. Their damnability is not measurable in the terms of the macrocosm, where it may work good, but we who are all in the same boat must not usurp the judge. The dominion of the ring was much too strong for the mean soul of Smial, but he would have never had to endure it if it had not become a mean if he had not become a mean son of a thief before it crossed his path. Need it ever have crossed his path? Need anything dangerous ever cross any of our paths? A kind of answer could be found in trying to imagine Gollum overcoming temptation. The story would have been quite different. By temporizing, not fixing the still not wholly corrupt Smeagol will towards good in the debate in the slag hole, he weakened himself for the final chance when dawning love of Frodo was too easily withered by the jealousy of Sam before Shelob's lair. After that, all was lost.
That's a good spot to stop, I think. I think it's really powerful to me where he says that by a situation created by his forgiveness, he was saved himself. And I think that's something we can probably all agree to, that when you forgiveness or pity that we hold out for others who have wronged us or could wrong us or whatever, we release ourselves from the chaos or whatever. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot. I just know in my own life that that's definitely true. And when people refuse to forgive, and there's a lot of bitterness lately, it just seems like our society is full of, just writing people off left and right. And I think this is really important, that people need to rediscover the power of forgiveness.
And that we must not usurp the judge. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And very often we take things into our own hands.
Oh, right.
And when we take things into our own hands, the result isn't good.
Well,
the
good luck with all that. I
result
hope
is
it goes
usually
smoothly.
evil.
Yes. Anthony, any last thoughts?
Sorry, I was just looking at the letter again. Not really. I guess just a note on pronunciation, kind of what we were talking about earlier. I think Gollum's name in the movies at least was like Smeagol, but I heard Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey pronounce it that says that the correct pronunciation is Smeagol. Kind of different.
Yeah.
Changing those. So.
Mark on there, isn't there? On the
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well,
you're saying that Jackson got it wrong. Like so many things.
Say it isn't so, Plucky. Say it isn't so.
PJ, oh, I like that. It's I should have it on my luggage. It's Disney's Robin Hood. I'm just thinking about how ridiculous sometimes. Peter Jackson, I love the guy. I think he's done a lot of good, but so ridiculous sometimes. But never mind. We are also
he's done a lot better than any films I've ever done.
True.
All right.
So I think that's it, Hawk.
Okay.
We'll have to continue the letter next week, or next month, rather.
All right. Great. Well, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. It was great to see you all here once again. Remember, we're here every third Saturday of the month from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. Our website is tolkienscholars.org. That's where you can find the meeting notes from all the previous meetings going back 16. And links and videos and such, for each of the upcoming sessions. And then these videos. If you miss these broadcasts, live broadcasts, you can always watch all the archive videos. youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars. And we're on Twitter. We don't use Facebook. We have a Facebook account. We never. Twice, I got my Facebook accounts up to thousands of friends and such who were all fellow Tolkienites, many of which we knew. And twice, Facebook then killed the accounts, turned them into pages, what have you, which basically is and then they did their newer algorithms that made it so when you post only 1 out of 17. Just got fed up with it. We don't use Facebook at all anymore. Announcements are either on our website or Twitter for Tolkien Scholars. And coming up later this summer, if you want to check out tolkienmoot.org, we'll be getting ready at some point. We're gonna have to probably next month. We should discuss some Tolkien Moot plan, getting that nailed. What we're gonna schedule-wise nail down and resources. What we want. RPG Research is having our 2021 year planning, our strategic, this January 20th. Probably be good at our next meeting, our 2020. Back on schedule with July, third weekend of July, on track, or if we need earlier, we decide that the sooner I can update the website, start spreading the word and getting people. Obviously, we'll have this on. So that we're looking forward to that. And I think that's it. So is there any final words you would like to have, Chris, then Brian?
Yeah, I know a. I think Brian was talking about this earlier, or with me at least. But I know one of my a teacher from my high school is a Catholic Jesuit priest. He's actually interested in joining one of these meetings. He hasn't gotten back to me yet on when he might be able to do so specifically, but I think he's also interested in if you guys are allow guest speakers.
Oh yeah,
Maybe if he could give like a talk or something, because he's taught The Hobbit before in his English classes. So yeah, I'll try to get in touch with him and see if he can come to one of our meetings.
that'd be great. Yeah, we used to do the Middle Earth talk show. Michael Martinez and I used kind of weekly, monthly talk show. That kind of went by the wayside. And that was a great place to guest speakers. We happily welcome at a number of times. Wagnerian one. We had Brian's brother. We yes, definitely love it when that happens.
And I think that's actually my comment would just be that it's good to look ahead. I think we really had a lot of synergy last meeting. And I'll try to send the notes out to you again soon, but also we'll try to beat the drum a little earlier this week. So apologies for that.
Makes a
But
difference.
it'd be really wonderful if we did try a couple times a year to get somebody in and think ahead, because we've got some different options. So yeah,
That'd be great.
I'm in support of that. As long as people know kind of who we are, and they're aware of kind of our vibe, and yeah, we're glad to have them.
Definitely. All right.
Next meeting will be February 20 for those who need to know.
Okay. Wonderful.
Mark.
Well, thank you all very much. Thank you, Brian, for extreme secretarial duty. And so we'll see you next time, wherever you may be. Well,
Namarie.
Namarie.
the song I got to get back on here is Eä's version of Namarie.
Bye, Chris. Bye, Anthony. Bye, Hawk.
Bye.
Have a good. Bye bye.